Hello there, you're watching World News Program. I'm Maritime and these are the headlines. On the 22nd day of the truce between Iran and the United States, Trump considers extending the embargo and urges Tehran to reach an agreement soon, while Pakistan confirms its efforts to narrow the gaps between the two sides. In Lebanon, widespread Zionist raids on southern towns and villages leave many martyrs. Hezbollah confirms its response to the aggression by targeting vehicles and gatherings of the occupation army. During the visit of the Polish Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister to Algeria, Warsaw affirmed that Algeria is Poland's most important partner in Africa, amid a joint emphasis on the need to strengthen bilateral partnership and elevate it to higher levels. Hello there and welcome back to the details of your nightly news. And first in our file, US President Donald Trump said that his country has defeated Iran militarily and will never allow it to obtain nuclear weapons. Speaking at a White House dinner attended by Charles III, he stressed this position, adding that the king agrees with him on this point.
And we're doing a little Middle East work right now, too, if you might know. And we're doing very well. We have militarily defeated that particular opponent, and we're never going to let that opponent ever, Charles agrees with me, even more than I do, we're never going to let that opponent have a nuclear weapon. They know that, and they've known it right now very powerfully.
Donald Trump urged Iran to get smart soon and strike a deal after days of stalled efforts to end the conflict. In a Truth Social post, he said Iran is unable to unite and doesn't know how to sign a non-nuclear agreement. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal reported, citing U.S. officials, that Donald Trump instructed aides to prepare for a prolonged blockade of Iran.
I can't get their act together. They don't know how to sign a non-nuclear deal. They better get smart soon.
The White House said U.S. negotiators remain in contact with Iranians struggling to resolve their leadership situation. NBC, citing Donald Trump, reported he will only sign a deal that puts U.S. national security first.
We're going to continue to...
A Pakistani official said his country is continuing diplomatic efforts to bridge the gaps between the U.S. and Iran to ease tensions and advance talks. He added that Islamabad's mediation is ongoing with sustained efforts to bring both sides closer. Pakistan said its efforts are ongoing to sustain a ceasefire and promote peace in the Middle East. In a post on X, Pakistan Prime Minister said the war has slowed economic growth due to rise in oil prices, adding that Islamabad will emerge stronger. The proposed deal to ease global energy tensions collapsed after Donald Trump rejected Iran's offer to reopen the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for postponing nuclear talks, insisting that nuclear and missile issues must be addressed first. Osama Ayad is the report.
Tensions between the United States and Iran have escalated sharply after President Donald Trump rejected a proposal from Tehran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz under Iranian control in exchange for postponing nuclear negotiations. Sources reported that Iran suggested a phased approach in which it would restore maritime traffic through the strategic waterway while postponing discussions on its nuclear and missile programs. The proposal aimed to ease immediate pressure on global energy markets, where supply disruptions have already driven oil prices to a 3-week high. Trump, however, firmly dismissed the offer, insisting that any agreement must directly address Iran's nuclear ambitions and ballistic missile capabilities from the outset.
We're not going to let Iran have a nuclear weapon. And we've knocked out their Navy, we've knocked out their Air Force, we've knocked out their anti-aircraft, everything, apparatus, everything they have, their radar, they have very little left. And they have some missiles, a small percentage. They have a small percentage of missile-making facilities. We knocked out about 80% of them. The rest could come very quickly if we don't make a deal.
The rejection has heightened uncertainty in global markets as the Strait of Hormuz, which is one of the world's most critical oil transit checkpoints, remains partially closed. Roughly a fifth of global oil supply typically passes through the narrow passage, making its disruption a major concern for energy-dependent economies. The World Bank has warned that continued instability could push global energy prices significantly higher, projecting a potential 24% increase in 2026 if the crisis persists. Analysts say such a surge would likely fuel inflation, strain developing economies, and complicate recovery efforts worldwide.
Wir haben angeboten, auch als Europäer.
And it's costing us a lot of money. It is costing us a lot of tax money and taxing our economy. This conflict, this war against Iran, is having a direct negative effect on our economy and needs to be ended as soon as possible.
Diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the situation appear to be faltering. With both sides maintaining firm positions, Iran continues to demand relief from economic sanctions, while U.S. leadership prioritizes what it considers long-term security concerns. As negotiations stall and political tensions mount, the standoff underscores the fragile balance between energy security and international diplomacy, one that could have far-reaching consequences in the months ahead.
U.S. Minister of Defense Pete Hegseth said the war with Iran is not a quagmire, praising Donald Trump for preventing Tehran from obtaining nuclear weapons. Testifying for the first time before the U.S. Congress, he added Washington has the world's best negotiator for a deal with Iran, while criticizing Democrats as the administration's main current opponent. Iran filed a formal complaint to the United Nations Security Council accusing the United States of piracy after seizing Iranian oil tankers on the high seas and calling for international condemnation. In a letter, Iran's ambassador said U.S. forces forcibly took 2 oil tankers, calling it a clear violation of international law and the UN Charter. He also said U.S. statements about seizing millions of barrels of Iranian oil amount to an admission of these alleged violations.
On April 27, the U.S. Attorney General proudly spoke of the seizure of the vessels MT Majestic and MT Tiffany in what he described as an act of piracy, and of the subsequent theft of more than 3 million barrels of Iranian oil. These egregious and unlawful acts violate the established rules of international law governing the law of the sea and constitute a direct threat to maritime safety and security. The statement by the U.S. Attorney General clearly confirms that the armed forces of the United States intercepted Iranian commercial vessels on the high seas, boarded them, and detained them by force. In line with its policy of arrogance, this conduct is yet another example of the United States' addiction to violating the law and constitutes a blatant breach of the United Nations Charter.
In the same context, Tehran threatened it will respond with what it called new capabilities if the United States carries out any military action against Iran. According to Fars news agency, a senior naval official in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said the Iranian forces are fully ready for potential threats, adding that any U.S. miscalculation would be met with a different response, including targeting U.S. aircraft carriers. The president of the EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said any Middle East peace deal must address Iran's nuclear program and ballistic missiles. In a speech to the EU Parliament, von der Leyen added the EU seeks a long-term settlement, ensuring stability, stressing that restoring freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz is essential.
Our shared goal is now to see a lasting end to the war, and this includes restoring full and permanent freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz without tolls And it is equally clear that any peace agreement will have to address Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile program. But there's also a harsh reality we all need to face. The consequences of this conflict may echo for months or even years to come.
In the Lebanese file, 9 people were killed and 17 others injured in a Zionist airstrike in southern Lebanon, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry's Emergency Operations Center. Among the dead were 3 civilian defense paramedics, and several women were among the injured. In a separate strike, 5 members of one family were killed and 21 people wounded, including children and women, the ministry said. Hezbollah said it targeted 2 tanks and a gathering of Israeli soldiers in southern occupied Lebanese territory. It stated the operations were in response to ceasefire violations and attacks on civilians, and they caused losses in personnel and equipment. The organization Doctors Without Borders said Israeli forces are using drinking water as a tool of collective punishment in the Gaza Strip. Speaking to Al-24 News, the group's regional media director said the water crisis is no longer just a result of war, but a reality affecting over 2 million people, with about 90% of water and sanitation infrastructure damaged or destroyed. Another news, Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune received Polish Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Laszlo Sikorski and his delegation. According to the Algerian presidency, the meeting included senior Algerian officials and focused on bilateral ties. Sikorski said relations between Algeria and Warsaw are strong and expressed Poland's desire to further develop them, noting Algeria is Poland's top economic partner in Africa.
أشكركم على حفاوة الاستقبال الذي حظيت به ولقائي مع
I would like to thank you for the warm welcome I received and for my meeting with President Abdelmajid Tebboune during this visit to Algeria. We affirmed the strong relations between Poland and Algeria and expressed our desire to further develop them. I also look forward to continuing discussions with my counterpart, Minister of Foreign Affairs, the National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, following up on the dialogue we began in Warsaw in June 2014. This is the first visit by a Polish foreign minister to Algeria since 2017, and also my first personal visit.
Radosław Sikorski said Warsaw wants to boost the involvement of Polish companies, investors and exporters in Algeria's energy, renewable energy, agriculture and food industries. Let's have a listen.
تعتبر الجزائر شريكا مهما لبولندا باعتبارها أكبر دولة في إفريقيا.
Algeria is an important partner for Poland. Being the largest country in Africa and a major energy producer, Algeria possesses the 10th largest proven natural gas reserves in the world and the 16th largest crude oil reserves. It is also Poland's leading economic partner in North Africa. In 2025, trade between the two countries reached $1 billion, while Algerian exports doubled to approximately $300 million according to Polish statistics. The main objective of my visit was to review and strengthen bilateral relations, particularly in the area of economic cooperation. This is reflected in the presence of the Polish Deputy Minister of State Assets, along with senior officials representing major Polish companies such as Azot and Orlen. We aim to increase the involvement of Polish companies, investors and exporters, especially in the energy and renewable energy sectors, as well as in agriculture and the food industry.
Radosław Sikorski said talks with President Tebboune covered international issues focusing on security and stability in the context of Ukraine, the Middle East and the Sahel, as well as terrorism, irregular migration and mercenary activity. He also affirmed Poland's solidarity with Algeria in facing these challenges.
كما تناولت محادثاتنا
Our
القضايا
discussions also covered international issues focusing on security, stability, and respect for international law in the context of the situation in Ukraine, as well as in the Middle East and the Sahel region, which is unfortunately experiencing political instability, the spread of terrorism, illegal immigration, and the activities of foreign mercenaries. Algeria enjoys our solidarity in facing these challenges. We signed a cooperation agreement between the Polish Diplomatic Academy and the Institute of Diplomacy and International Relations in Algeria, aimed at strengthening the exchange of expertise and knowledge. We also agreed to take further steps to organize trade missions, cultural events, and academic exchanges, including a letter of intent that I signed on this occasion to enhance cooperation between Poland and Algeria. I look forward to continuing our cooperation in the future. Poland and Algeria are rediscovering each other, and I have high hopes for what we can achieve together.
Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf met with Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski in Algeria, followed by talks between both delegations. They reviewed bilateral cooperation and agreed to strengthen ties in energy, mining, renewables, agriculture, tourism, and digitization. The visit ended with a memorandum of understanding between the Algerian and Polish diplomatic institutes. In the same context, Ahmed Attaf and Radoslaw Sikorski also exchanged views on international and regional issues. According to Algeria's foreign ministry, discussions focused on developments in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine, and the situation in the Sahel region. Algerian Hydrocarbons Minister Mohamed Arqab discussed with Polish Deputy State Assets Minister Grzegorz Verona ways to boost cooperation between Sonatrach and Polish firms, especially in oil, gas, refining, and petrochemicals. The talks included proposals for joint projects in Algeria, such as methanol, melamine, phosphoric acid, and green ammonia production, as well as cooperation in LNG and LPG, marketing, and global oil product sales. Both also expressed interest in seawater desalination projects using Polish technology. Algeria reaffirmed its commitment to OPEC and OPEC Plus as key frameworks for stabilizing the global oil market. The Energy Ministry highlighted OPEC's role in protecting producers' interests and maintaining balanced dialogue with consumers, and said past decisions have helped support market stability and global growth. Algerian Prime Minister Sefir Ghayeb supervised the launch of a project in Tismsil to produce plastic components for cars, following instructions of President Abdelmajid Tebboune. The visit is part of efforts to revive seized projects and integrate them into the national economy, aiming to turn productive assets into a driver of growth and wealth creation. Sefir Ghayeb said the launch of a car plastic components factory is part of President Abdelmajid Tebboune's commitment to recover and revive seized assets. He added that the project will give new momentum to Algeria's automotive industry.
We are witnessing together the launch of a project that falls within the commitments of the President of the Republic, particularly those related to recovering and revitalizing assets that were confiscated under final judicial rulings. This factory will undoubtedly bring new momentum to the automotive industry, as you have seen firsthand, the various plastic components used in car manufacturing that this facility will be able to produce, using methods aligned with the latest technologies applied worldwide.
And in Batna, Algerian Prime Minister Sefir Ghayeb inaugurated several industrial projects as part of a strategy to revive seized assets and reintegrate them into the economy. The projects include a factory for metal parts for car bodies and a unit for assembling truck refrigeration systems, aiming at strengthening local manufacturing and boosting Algeria's automotive supply chain.
كل هذا يندرج في تعزيز النجيز الصناعي.
All of this falls within strengthening the national industrial base for the automotive sector. From there, we can gradually move away through a steady, well-structured and scientific approach from what is known as tire inflation. All manufacturers who wish to come to Algeria must understand something new. There is now a new industry emerging in Algeria. We are working to build a genuine industrial sector that meets the needs of the national market, far from purely symbolic manufacturing. The production of plastic components, as is well known globally, helps increase added value at the local level and even for exports. We are carrying this out steadily and methodically, integrating all stakeholders in the process.
The first edition of the African-Mediterranean Meetings of Thought opened in Algiers under the patronage of President Abdelmajid Tebboune. The event, inaugurated by Culture Minister Maryam Bendouda at the International Conference Center Abdelatif Rahad, focused on the legacy of St. Augustine and Algeria's role as a bridge between Africa and the Mediterranean, with the aim to foster intellectual dialogue between African and Mediterranean thinkers amid growing global cultural and technological challenges.
In fact, the Afro-Mediterranean thought meetings are a platform for dialogue, thinking and reflection, a philosophical platform and a cultural platform that Algeria wants. It is open to both to Africa and the Mediterranean. As I said, Algeria is a platform for dialogue, thinking and reflection. I am happy that there is an important international representation from all the Mediterranean and Africa. This year's edition is dedicated to an Algerian philosopher. We consider him as an African and Mediterranean figure. It is a special moment at the beginning of these meetings. Of course, the next meetings will be dedicated to thinkers from the Mediterranean and Africa.
And the head of the France-Algeria Association, Ségolène Royal, hailed the philosophy of St. Augustine as an important step. Speaking at the African-Mediterranean Meetings of Thought in Algiers, she praised Algeria's efforts to promote Augustine's legacy, saying it reflects tolerance and dialogue in a world marked by conflict.
I am pleased to have the opportunity to attend these Afro-Mediterranean thought meetings being held here in Algeria, where St. Augustine is the theme of this first edition. I must say that the quality of this morning's discussions was extremely valuable. In a world marked by disorder, selfishness, and materialism, this is about returning to the fundamentals of philosophical thought, the essence of what constitutes goodness, truth and justice, a profound way of thinking that continues to guide us today. This comes just after the visit of the Pope Francis, which, thanks to Algeria, has cast new light on this exceptional thinker, St. Augustine. So I too am discovering many things. And what I can tell you is that the witness and philosophy transmitted to us by St. Augustine have never been more important than they are today.
And finally, U.S. President Donald Trump said he discussed a possible Ukraine ceasefire with Vladimir Putin during a phone call. And the Kremlin has said the talks included a temporary ceasefire to coincide with Russia's Victory Day the next month. Nabil Khazini has the report.
The sound is steady, relentless, the clock ticking in the background. Time is moving forward, but forward what? In the space between each tick, a question hangs in the air. Is this the countdown to a ceasefire or to another missed chance? Thousands of kilometers away, words have been exchanged, not on a battlefield, but over a phone line. Last evening, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin spoke directly for the first time in weeks. A conversation described as good, even familiar, but beneath that simplicity lies something far more fragile. Trump says he suggested a little bit of a ceasefire. Putin, in turn, proposed something more defined, a temporary truce in early May, aligned with Victory Day, one of Russia's most symbolic national moments.
We had a very good conversation. I think we're going to come up with a solution relatively quickly, I hope.
What does he want?
I think you'd like to see a solution, I can tell you, and that's good.
On paper, it sounds like progress, a pause, a window. But history complicates the picture. A similar ceasefire was proposed before, brief, unilateral, and ultimately ineffective. Fighting did not truly stop. Trust did not grow, and Kiev was not part of the agreement.
Donald Trump позитивно оценил.
Trump stressed the importance of ceasing hostilities in Ukraine as soon as possible, and that he is willing to do everything possible on his part to help achieve that. His close aides will continue contacts with both Moscow and Kiev. Donald Trump believes a deal that would end the conflict in Ukraine is now close.
Beyond diplomacy, the war continues to speak its own language. In Kiev, falling drone debris injures civilians. Fires break out. The war has not paused to wait for negotiations, and it rarely does. And in Moscow, preparations are underway for Victory Day, though even there, the tone has shifted. Military displays are scaled back, security concerns rising, the shadow of the war creeping into even the most symbolic celebrations. This is the contradiction at the heart of the moment. On one side, cautious optimism, a positive reaction, the possibility of a temporary halt. On the other, ongoing strikes, mutual distrust, and a ceasefire proposal not yet agreed upon by Ukraine itself.
That wraps up tonight's newscast. Thank you for watching.